Hey, namaste again. This is Raghavendra Kare. So we saw in part one how the Indus Saraswati civilization collapsed somewhere around 1800 to 2000 BC. Fast forward to 19th century when British were ruling India. There was this judge called William Jones who was in on assignment to India, and he started studying Sanskrit. He was basically located in Calcutta, and with some pundits in Kolkata, he started studying Sanskrit, and he realized that the classical Sanskrit language is so closely related to ancient Greek language and Latin language, and he was really impressed with the way the Sanskrit grammar works. Later on, the Max Muller, who came to India and translated the entire Vedas. So the first time the Western audience could read the ancient Indian scripture Vedas in English, and he translated it in German. Um, and Suddenly there was this huge interest in Eastern philosophy, especially the Vedic Upanishadic philosophy in the Western world. It is said that the philosophers such as Voltaire or Immanuel Kant were greatly impressed with the Eastern philosophical thought. And this Max Muller first introduced this term called Aryan race. And that time, little did he know about the tragic consequences of this term would have on the European history, especially in the World War II. The Hitler, he took the inspiration from this all works because they found that there was some Aryan race who conquered the entire India or entire Europe at some point, and it's a pure Aryan race. So um, just remember that the Middle East, the languages spoken like in Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew, Syriac, all these languages are not part of that Sanskrit and Indo-European languages. So these are completely different languages. So Hitler said that the Jews, the language that they spoke, which is in Hebrew language, is not an Aryan language. So they are impure race, and this whole purity of race got into Europe, and all this Holocaust took place in Europe because of this one mistake by this guy called Max Muller. Max Muller really regretted that. In later in his book, he said that he should not have used the word Aryan race because the Arya, the word as used in Vedic languages, is basically used as an adjective for a noble person. It does not indicate any race or any people or group of people. The Vedic people used to call this Indian region, especially the northwestern and central India region, as Aryavrat, and that does not mean that it was belong to any particular race. Uh, with that, the inspiration was taken by this Dravidian, this entire Aryan Dravidian divide. British took it to their advantage, and they divided India in Aryan and Dravidian. This whole concept of British that hey, there is some race, pure race, the white race, which came earlier and suppressed you guys. So you are also, somehow they kind of wanted to justify the British rule in India, because the Aryan ruled India earlier, and now we as a white race are ruling you, and they wanted to justify with this Aryan Dravidian theory, and Dravidian took it by heart. They somehow started propagating that, hey, we are different people, you are different people, and this kind of got into weird celebration of defeat in Dravidian politics. And there were some texts in Vedas which were interpreted as if some kind of a war, and they came from outside. And then this famous statement by Mortimer Wheeler, who saw some skeletons in the Indus civilization, and he declared that Indra stands accused because Indra was supposed to be the king of Aryans. And but later discoveries, there were no arms, no warlike injuries, no chariots, no horse remains in that area. So this entire theory of Aryan invasion was debunked. Later analysis of the skeletons it was found that they were a completely different epoch and not of an ancient Harappans. And then Wheeler himself rejected this whole theory uh, that this corpses does not belong to the Aryan, does not belong to the Indus civilization. However, once this theory was seeded in India as a divisive, rule and divide policy, somehow it got into India and it's not going away since that date. And Aryan invasion is taught into a lot of school today as a nomadic pastoralist people coming from outside and driving the people from northern western region into the south region. However, there is absolutely no evidence of such archaeological evidence or linguistic evidence of such a event ever happened. And if you look at the satellite images today, it is found that after the collapse of Indus Valley civilization, as you can see here, most of the civilization has moved from this region into the eastern part of the region, the Gangetic region, not to the south part of the region. So it looks like the same people who were living here due to some climatic changes. They started moving towards east because that was more fertile region for them. So it does not support any Dravidian migration from the northwestern India into the south of India. So coming back to the language families, so the entire languages of the world are divided into different language families. One is the Indo-European language family, Sino-Tibetan language family, Afro-Asiatic language family, Dravidian, Japanese, Altaic, and other families. But 50% of the world population speaks Indo-European languages, including India, Iran, Russia, and entire Europe. So these Indian European language families are further divided into mainly 10 families. The Hellenic, which is the Greek language, Indo-Iranian language family, the Italic, which is also known as the Romance language family, Celtic, Germanic, Armenian, Baltic, Slavic, Albanian. So if you look at the spread of the language, the most of the language families are into the European part. The only language family available in the Indian part is the Indo-Aryan and Iranian language family. There are two other language families which were spoken earlier, but now are extinct. One is the Anatolian. Anatolian is basically the Turkish region, so the language spoken there was now extinct. And the Tocharian language, which was a form of Indo-European language, which was spoken in Chinese region, which is again now extinct, and the China now speaks Sino-Tibetan language. But there are some inscriptions found in those regions which indicate that the Indo-European language families were spread across that region as well. So if you look at these 10 language families and the present language, the modern descendants of those language families, and you'll be surprised that basically there is the misconception that comes from Greek. That's not true. The English comes from the Germanic language, and the Germanic language is the current. There was a Proto-Germanic language, which now the English, German, Afrikaans, Dutch, all these languages fall into that Germanist family of languages. The Indo-Iranian languages, which is spoken mostly in India, is now further divided into Bengali, Konkani, Marathi, Gujarati, Punjabi, Sindhi, Kashmiri, and all those languages spoken in India today. The Indo-Iranian are also like Sakha, Avestan, Iranian languages are also falls into that family of languages. If you look at the words, and that's absolutely true. If you look at the words, the kinship. If you look at the Sanskrit and the English words, the Sanskrit is called matra, mother, pitra, father, brata, brother, sister, duhitar, daughter. All these words are so close to each other. Even the pronouns, aham, I, mum, me, you, yum, all these pronunciations are very close. The numbers, if you look at the numbers, dwa means two, three means three. All these numbers match with each other. Even if you look at the animals, a lot of animal names are closely related. The root verb matches with the English word families. There are tons of words. I mean, they have constructed from all these language families something called as the Proto-Indo-European language family. So these languages today that are spoken, maybe Sanskrit, German, Italic, Celtic, Armenian, Slavic, Baltic, Russian. All these languages are not the original languages. All these languages have come from one original languages, which they gave a name called Proto-Indo-European languages. Um, so there are three basic hypotheses. So if there is one language, so the language of Northern India, Iran, Central Asia, Europe, if they are all related to each other, all these language families must therefore be descended from a common ancestral languages. So there are three hypotheses, three postulates proposed here. One, the language families are similar. So we know that the Indian languages, Iranian languages, European languages are similar. So that means the second postulate means that languages must have come from some ancestral language family, some ancestral language family. They call it Proto-Indo-European languages. And this ancestral language must have been spoken in one particular. So this is the third postulate. So if this these languages are spoken across the world from one end, which is the Bangladesh, to the other end, which is the Britain, or on the south, there is Sinhalese language spoken in Sanskrit is also spoken in Sri Lanka is also an Indo-European languages. So if all these languages are spoken at different geographical area, at some point when this Proto-Indo-European language was spoken, there must have been place, one place where all these people were located, and this is called as the question of Uremat. Uremat in German language means original homeland. So what is the original homeland? And all this fight is about this original homeland. The one theory proposed by Maria Gumbitas is called as the Kurgan hypothesis, which locates the homeland in the steppe or present day Kazakhstan, Russia area. The another theory proposed is called as an Anatolian hypothesis, which locates the homeland of this Indo-European languages in Turkey. And the third proposal, the third hypothesis is the India as a homeland, which is called as the out of India theory. The out of India theory has not got much of an academic acceptance globally, but recently, with a lot of Indian scholars proposing this theory and giving a justification, this in coming years, this might get gain more popularity at a global level. So the first proposal to find the Indo-European homeland, the original homeland, was proposed by this historian called Maria Gimbutas. It's called Kurgan hypothesis, and she looked at the spread of the Indo-European languages. So the west, the spread is up to Britain. In the Bell, it's what is called as a Bell Baker culture, and in the eastern side, the spread is up to the Chinese, China, which is basically the Tocharian language. So she decided to place the original homeland in the middle of these um, two regions where these languages were spoken. And then she came up with this proposal called steppe hypothesis or Kurgan hypothesis. So steppe is a region in the south of Russia, which is basically the grassland region. So she said that, hey, these people were living in the grassland, and then she came up with this proposal of the various waves of Indo-European people starting from 3500 BC all the way up to 1800, 1500 BC throughout the world. So the first wave came into the Turkish region, which is called as an Anatolia in the ancient language. So it came in the ancient language. Then some of the people moved into the Europe in the European language and spread the European languages there. Some group of the people moved from Yamnaya. Yamnaya culture is basically the pit grave culture. So they buried their dead inside of deep pit. So that Yamnaya culture, from there they move into the Adronova culture, and from the Adronova culture, it's found that they moved into the Vedic culture and Iranian cultures later on. So why did Sanskrit was not proposed as the original language, or why this Sanskrit has not proposed as antique as the Anatolian languages? Because the initial timeline of Rig Veda, the only source that we have, as far as the Sanskrit language is concerned, the oldest source we have is Rig Veda. So the 19th century logic was, when the British came, the first thing which could be dated, that was found in India, was the Ashoka pillar, which was basically 300 BC. So they established the Ashoka pillar was 300 BC. The Ashoka pillar had references to Buddha, so decided that the Buddhas were like 200, 300 before that Ashoka pillar was constructed. So they came up with this timeline for Buddha is around 500, 600 BC. So Buddha or 500, 600 BC, the Buddha had a mention of Upanishadic text prior to that. So they came up with the Upanishada at around 1200 BC. And similarly, the Iron Age in India started at around 1200 BC, and Rig Veda had no mention of the iron, so they put the Rig Veda before that Iron Age, which is around 1500 BC. There is some controversy in that Iron Age theory, because some people think that the word ayas, which is mentioned in Rig Veda, means iron, but many linguistic have translated that word as copper, and that kind of fits it. So they put it at 1500 BC. Why 1500 BC? Because at 1900 BC the IVC collapsed. So if the IVC collapsed at 1900 BC, and IVC had no mention of any horses or chariots, the Rig Veda is full of um, horses and chariots. Lots of hymns are there which mention horses and chariots. And there are no significant uh, indications of any horses or chariots in the um, in the Indus civilization. They decided that the Rig Veda was written after the collapse of Indus Saraswati civilization. And note that they put it at 1500 BC, so it was conclusively proven that there was no archaeological evidences of Aryan entering the Indus civilization at 1900 BC when it collapsed. So even during the 1970s, when the Kurgan hypothesis was proposed initially, it was right away rejected that any Aryan invasion took place in India. So they they proposed the theory of Aryan migration. So there was no invasion but the migration. If you look at the terminologies, which are basically similar to a Ratha terminology, so if you look at the word Rath, which is mainly used for chariot, in Iran it's called Rota, in Latin it's called Rota, in Irish it's called Rath. The English word rotate, sounds very similar to the Ratha. So all these words so closely resemble the Indic uh, chariot, which is Ratha. Even the vehicle, the word vehicle is basically in India, it's called Vahan, which is very similar sounding names. Um, However, later on, some indication of horse or chariot remains was discovered in the Indus Valley civilization starting at around 2000 BC. So in Daimabad, we have found this figurine with someone driving a chariot-like thing, with a spoked wheel. In Sinoli recently in 2018, they found this chariot-looking vehicle, which again had some kind of a spoked wheel. Spoked wheel is very important thing because the wheels were there, like the solid wheels were already there in Mesopotamia, in Indus Saraswati civilization, in all the civilizations. But the spoked wheel was a new invention. Due to the spokes, the weight of the wheel reduced, and now you could drive it at a very fast rate. The speed was achieved because of the spoked wheel. So spoked wheel is a very important significance when it comes to Aryan languages. They found some horse remain in Surkotada, but later on, some scientists have questioned whether they were horses or wild donkeys. The horses, the word is called as equus cabellus. So, are they equus cabellus or some kind of a wild donkeys? that question still remains. So with these new discoveries, and we'll talk about the Saraswati and other astronomical references in Vedas, and that puts the composition of Vedas somewhere around 3000 BC. It is interesting to note that if you look at the early scholars, the who accepted the Aryan migration invasion theory and who rejected it, the accepted scholars were Lokmanya Tilak, who wrote this article in Vedas, and who proposed that the Aryans came from outside. What happened was, the upper caste Hindus felt uh, really good to be associated with the white race and the European people during that time, and they willingly accepted this Aryan migration theory, whereas the Dalit uh, proponent, Dr. Ambedkar, who is the great scholar, who after studying Vedas very clearly said that there is nothing in Vedas that refers to any race as an Aryan race, and there is no evidence in the Vedas of any invasion of India by Aryan race. So he outrightly rejected any Aryan migration or Aryan invasion theory. He proposed that all Indians share an equal genetic material, and we are all equal. Apart from the fact that who accepted the theory or who rejected the theory, nowadays it has been exactly reversed. The upper caste Hindus are trying to propose the no Aryan migration or Aryan invasion happened, whereas the Neo Dalit organizations are trying to propose that there was some Aryan migration, some Aryan invasion happened, and they are the entire politics, caste politics in India is governed by such theories. The politics apart, let's look at the scientific way of analyzing this theory. So, even evidences to prove any theory are one, the linguistic evidence, linguistic evidence. So, there has to be some language kind of evidence. There has to be some archaeological evidence, the literary evidence, geographical evidence, a cultural evidence, and a genetic evidence. So, we will try to analyze this Aryan migration, Aryan invasion theory on the basis of these six criterias. So there are four main theories. So before we go into the six criteria, let's first define what are those four main theories. The first theory is called as an Aryan invasion theory or Aryan Dravidian theory, which proposes that the Aryans from Caspian Pontic Sea region, basically the steppe region, they moved into India and drove away the Dravidians back into the south. So it's called an Aryan invasion theory. Then another is the Aryan migration theory, which proposes that the invasion didn't take place, but some people did migrate in flocks from outside India, especially from the Eastern European region into India during 2000 to 1500 BC. There is another interesting theory called as an out of India theory. Like I said, it was not accepted academically initially, but nowadays there are strong proponents of this out of India theory, and they propose that some of the Indian groups, some of the Indian tribes from northwestern India, they moved into out of India through Iran and through Middle East into the Europe, and that's why we find this genetic similarity between the European and North Indians. And the one theory that was proposed by David Anthony, which I spoke about, this book called The Horse, Will, and the Language, he proposed this illiterate treatment theory, specifically in context of India, because he clearly proposed that some of the people from southern Russia, Kazakhstan region moved into Europe and completely changed the landscape of the Europe. They completely changed the languages of the Europe. However, he says that when it comes to India, there was no large scale migrations. There were some people having chariots or horses. They were kind of a trader people. Some elite people moved into India and they interacted with the elite people from the Indus Valley civilization, and they collaborated together. And that theory is called as the elite recruitment theory. We will talk about all these four theories in our later part three, and we'll close the part two here. Thank you.